What are you guys calling consciousness exactly, and how do we upgrade it?
That's a really good question. There's actually was a play on words. And so there's the classic definition of a philosophical, what is a conscious being and what is it not. But really, the play we wanted to get at with having consciousness in the title is, are you simply being aware? The biggest issue we wrote the book for was to try to help people understand, with technology now, we're having a battle of exchanging our own physiology. In other words, we're losing our own conscious awareness of what's happening with ourselves. This is really like, are you even aware of the fact that you're losing awareness? And that's what people really aren't even understanding, because with some of the training technology and health technologies, there's pros and cons. It's not an anti-tech book. But it is, oh, by the way, this has been slowly being taken away from you, and you weren't even aware of that. That's all I want to restore. And so I don't want people to not use these devices. I just want you to use them consciously. And that's really what we meant by it.
So how do people begin to develop that awareness? You talk about in the book thirst, and you're like, there's now an app for that, which is pretty ridiculous. You know, we've had millions of years to hone this ability to know when to drink and know when to eat. So how do we become more aware of these things, and how do we develop the intuition and the instincts that you guys talk about?
Well, several things. Number one, that right there. Simply trying to be aware, paying attention to consuming, whether it's food, whether it's water, whether it's your physical feeling, whether it's your exercise. Maybe when you go to exercise and you go to train, don't be on your fucking phone the whole time. Why? Because that thing that you're feeling in between your set, you should be feeling, but you're not, because you're now adding external stimuli. So then when we ask questions, or when your trainer or your coach or the person you're consulting with is trying to ask you questions about how'd that feel, or what went on in that rep, how did that thing go? You don't have any time to downgrade and process what's actually happened and think about what's going to go on next, because you're spending too much time stepping out of your own brain and your own physiology and going to the external stimuli. Thirst, same thing. Like, are you really thinking about how thirsty you are or hungry you are? This is one of the reasons why I like fasting in different aspects, simply because if I then take you and take some of these stimuli away, and then I ask you, well, did you notice what that felt like when you got hungry? Like, was it really hunger? You think your blood sugar really crashed because you didn't have a meal in 30 minutes? Or do you think that you just simply got behaviorally, because you weren't paying attention and you got behaviorally ready to eat there and it didn't happen, now all of a sudden you're throwing off your thing? So the first thing would be simply becoming aware of what's happening. And the easiest way to do that is to decrease the amount of external stimuli coming in. And just being with your own self as much as possible. And then number two, this is when we can bring in technologies, and we can start putting objective and subjective measures behind your progress, your performance, whatever thing it is that you're interested in. But those things need to be in order. The final step would then be to go back away from the technology and see if you can now understand the signal that your body told you. So let me give you an example. Say you're having a hard time controlling your blood glucose. Or you at least felt like that. You felt, man, I'm getting these crashes up and down all day. I think it's my blood glucose. Okay, fine. Step number one would be that awareness. Good. You felt the sensations that your body's telling you. That's a start. Step number two, now let's deploy some technology. Let's measure your blood glucose constantly. Okay, fantastic. Step number three would then be say, hey, I am noticing actually, based on my data, based on what I'm feeling, when I do these types of behaviors, eating-wise or whatever else, caffeine, stimulants, this is when I have my problems. But don't stop there. The final step is then to say, okay, come back now. Can I remove that technology and match the same feeling and fix it? You should be able to then identify when you don't have your continuous glucose monitor on to go, hey, you know what? I'm feeling right now that I'm starting to get irritable, or I'm doing this. I need to fix my lifestyle again. I need to go back, and I know this is a problem when I'm not sleeping. I notice this is an issue I get when I didn't have enough water today, or I had a poor choice in food. But if you can't then understand your own physiology to a level where you can fix that without needing more technology, you're going to fail. That's the short game, and I want you to play the long game.
That's really an interesting concept. You talk a lot about blocking and tackling. Like, if people dive into your world, they're going to hear that, not those words, but you're going to talk about getting back to the basics, doing the simple things. Paint me that lifestyle. What is the lifestyle of blocking and tackling? So clearly we have being aware, like really stopping, listening to your body, figuring out where you're at, That to me is the interesting part about wearing a continuous glucose monitor, is to develop the awareness so that if you didn't have it, that you
100%.
know where you're at. But getting developing the awareness to associate, I feel this way, and it's in this broader context. I think people aren't diving into that. So what is that blocking and tackling? What is that sort of getting back to basics lifestyle look like, so that people can, step into a life that feels awesome, which I assume is sort of the point for you, to put people in a state where they feel great.
Yeah, I don't have a prescription to give you for that. And I don't think there should be one.
Meaning a one size fits all.
Yeah, or meaning like, this is how your day should be set up. Here are the routines you should have. Here are the things you should do and not do. Not only will I not give you that, but I don't think that should exist. I don't think we should strive for that.
So how do people titrate their own lives? Like, how do they find what works for them?
So a handful of things. Number one, again, paying attention to begin with. What are the problems you're having? Are we sure that those are problems? And then we can question those assumptions. So I think a second ago you said something like, okay, I've got my glucose monitor continually going. And I notice that association when I do this behavior and my blood glucose goes out of whack. Well, I would actually question that assumption right there. Why are you letting something like a blood glucose measure control then how you behave?
Can I answer that question?
Absolutely.
So the reason that I do it is largely because I want to have a health span that's extraordinarily long. So I have a base assumption, and I'm super open, so if this base assumption is wrong, let me know. But my base assumption is that within a range, if I can keep my glucose on the lower end, and all pegs sort of ideal for where I feel good and where I think has optimal longevity. And like you, I'm not dogmatic, so I'm super open to being changed. So just trying to do things that I think aren't going to fuck me up. That's why I wear it.
Yeah.
So because I'm constantly testing foods. So for instance, sweet potato, how does it affect me?
Sure.
Do Japanese sweet potatoes affect me differently than otherwise? Is it different if I air fry it versus eat them raw?
Totally.
Like, I want to not just trust like how I feel, but to see like, is there an impact between my average glucose level and say my HA1C levels, like that kind of stuff. That's where I'm headed with it.
Totally fine. Here's the point. You have a thesis, you have a hypothesis, rather, right? So you have something that you think is going on. Then we can deploy this technology to help get us information there. But we also have to step back originally to say, okay, all this is under the foundation that you're assuming having a very tightly controlled blood glucose is what's needed for the long-term benefit there, right? Well, what happens if that's not the case? We have huge problems, right? Now, in this particular case, it's probably not an issue, but with other technologies, they can be. Or with anything like this, any aspect of our life, if we come back to the original base assumption, let's assume that that's actually wrong. How much of that did you let influence your life? How much did you let the fact that you woke up and your HRV score maybe was middle today or poor? We actually have good evidence on this now that oftentimes that can lead people into having a poor day. And so what I don't want to happen is, for example, you check a food and all of a sudden you see a little bit of elevation in your blood glucose beyond what you like. I don't want you then to say, oh my God, okay, because of that, I'm now gonna have a mood swing.